Congratulations to the host for activating the family binding system. Everyone will have their own home. After binding with the family, you and the family will prosper, and once you destroy it, you will be destroyed. Of course, the prosperity of the family can also bring you a huge improvement, whether it is the strength of chakra, or the limit of blood inheritance. Uchiha Hahara, who was sitting in his room, now had a pale face, especially looking at the panel in his retina. He felt his brain was a little dazed. He knew what it was, and if there were no accidents, it should be his golden finger. But the problem is that he has traveled here for 15 years, a full 15 years, at least others can still play if you are a brother, come and kill me for 3 years. And what he was playing was, but the real version of if you're a ninja, come and kill me. He hasn't seen him after waiting for so many years, and he is already planning to give up, not to mention his current strength is not bad. 15 years have passed since Uchiha Habara crossed over. His luck is very good, because he was too young to escape the craziest moment of World War III. He was just the same age as Shisui Uchiha, who was also a classmate, at the end of the Third World War, and went to the battlefield together to experience the cruelty of war. However, as a time traveler, although he couldn't stand the cruelty on the battlefield, he still had a strong mental power after all. And he has always been very clear about how the evolution of Sharingan should be carried out, so he has been trying to improve his Sharingan in the past 15 years. And now, even though he is only 15 years old, like Zishui, he has been hailed as one of the best geniuses in the family. It's just that he knows very well in his heart that he is actually far behind Zishui. This kid Zishui has the potential of Kaleidoscope Sharingan. And although he himself knows how to open the Kaleidoscope Sharingan, he still hasn't found the right emotion to activate it. The opening method of Kaleidoscope Sharingan is not that you must kill your closest people, what it needs is an extreme mental stimulation and fluctuation. So killing your closest person would be the easiest way, but it doesn't work for him at all. After all, if he knows this method, he will naturally be mentally prepared. This is a person's own self-protection. He doesn't even need to try to know that he will fail. Without the Kaleidoscope Sharingan, there is no way to deal with Uchiha Ataka's madness. In the end, I'm afraid it's just the soul of this guy's knife. 15 years have passed, and it has been Konoha's 54th year and almost 55 years, which means that it is less than a year before Uchiha Ataka does it. Moreover, the atmosphere in the family is becoming more and more depressed now, and there seems to be an illusion that a storm is coming. Habara is aware of such a tragedy, and he has nothing to do to solve it, so there is only one thing he can do: run away. At this time, he has already started to pack his things, ready to turn around and run at the right time. Can't he hide if he can't be provoked? If you run away and keep a low profile, you will be close to death, but if you stay, you will die out of 10, so it seems clear at a glance how to choose. But today, when he was planning where he was going to go, a panel suddenly appeared in the corner of his eyes. The information in this panel immediately turned Yu Yuan's face blue. He never dreamed that his golden finger would be activated at this time. Even if you activate it, you actually bound yourself to the Uchiha clan? Does this count as being kidnapped? And how long can the Uchiha clan live? A little more is a year, but strictly speaking, whether there are 10 months is a problem. Even if the Uchiha clan is saved now, what about the future? Not to mention the guy flying in the sky yelling a bag of rice to resist several floors and flattening Konoha in one fell swoop. Just a little carelessness in the Chunin exam will cause them to lose a lot of people. What the is a bound family? It's basically bound to Konoha, by the way, and it's impossible for me to run away with my family. Regardless of Konoha's accident and family suffered together. Running away with the family, not to mention who would care about him, even if he really became Konoha, would he let them go? Thinking of this, Uchiha Habara really felt even more depressed and had a headache, but he had nothing better to do so far. But now he knows that he can't run away at all. The ghost knows that when he ran outside, Uchiha Ataka made a move, and then he died inexplicably. This is too much for the loss. It doesn't matter if other people die, but he must not die. Shaking his head helplessly, all he can do now is to try his best to think of a solution, and at the same time see what else is in the system. Current binding, Uchiha clan current status, extremely bad. The family is in a state of serious division, and there are villains looking around from the outside. Prosperity, 8848, normal family base prosperity is 10,000, suggestion, end the state of family division as soon as possible, stabilize the internal environment of the family, and unite those who can unite to face difficulties together. You also know how bad the Uchiha clan is now. Why are you still activating it now, Yu? Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. It's better not to activate it for the rest of your life. Uchiha Habara couldn't bear it anymore when he saw this. He swears directly, but fortunately there is no one around, otherwise he might be treated like a psychopath. How chaotic and divided is the Uchiha clan? It's very simple. You can refer to the Lighthouse of Freedom on the other side of the Pacific Ocean in Habara's previous life. Clansmen who can become ninjas have a natural level of conflict with those who cannot become ninjas. And after being able to become a ninja, there are also level contradictions between those who can open Sharingan and those who cannot. Uchiha also turned the security department into a family business, so that even those who can enter the security department and those who cannot enter the security department have level contradictions. In addition, there are two major factions in the Uchiha clan. One is the Hawk faction, who is the main battle, and the other is the Dove faction, who is the main peace. These two factions are also fighting endlessly, doing almost everything except fighting, and the whole family is forced to stand in line no matter who it is. Anyway, how the Uchiha clan came into chaos, how they split up. But what made Uchiha Habara look a little better was that the system still gave him something. The host is bound to the family is also prosperous, and the host can gain more power according to the current situation of the family. The host can obtain 3 abilities to practice dancing in the sky, can use chakra to fly in the sky, profound art Chidori, you can throw kunao with lightning escape chakra, each of which has the power of Chidori, you can get it through skills without the thunder escape attribute, glorious evolution, you can obtain power fragments by killing enemies, thereby improving one of your own abilities, the number of times can be 1/1. Seeing the 3 options in front of him, Habara couldn't help but fell into deep thought. None of these 3 skills are Naruto world skills, and 2 of them come from a game he played in his previous life. As for the other one, if there is no mistake, it seems to be the world that can blow up a planet with one punch, right? Although the origin of these abilities is indeed a bit weird, it has to be said that these 3 abilities are very, very coveted by him. Not to mention the Wukong technique, which allows people to fly in the sky. You must know that there are not many people in the entire Naruto world who can fly. Mystery Chidori should be the ability of the electric mouse, but it seems to have been transformed here, which is equivalent to the power of a shuriken thrown out. The most important thing is, if you don't have the attribute of thunder escape, you can also get this ability naturally. This is very powerful. This is equivalent to obtaining a powerful ninjutsu, and at the same time picking up a chakra attribute for nothing. As for the last glorious evolution, it is obviously a passive skill, and in the case that Habara did not take the route of mechanical ascension, it can actually improve an ability. Although the conditions are a bit harsh, it needs Yubara to kill his enemies to get some power fragments, but its effect is really terrible. This also means that Habara is now Sanguya Sharingan, so he can use this ability to upgrade his Sharingan to a kaleidoscope. Is this considered a home-delivered benefit? Although he was in a very bad mood, facing such a reward, he felt that it was not unacceptable. Because he has the kaleidoscope Sharingan, he can be considered to have a certain ability to protect himself in the family. Although time is running out, he must work hard for his own life. He will never accept that he died in this ghost place. Acquired skill, Glorious Evolution Activation Condition, 100 power fragments are required to complete the activation power fragments, you can get 25 for the top ninja, 20 for the middle ninja, 10 for the low ninja, and 1 to 5 for ordinary enemies. Friendly reminder, ninja level has nothing to do with ninja strength, please work harder on the host. After Uchiha Habara made his choice, a system prompt panel appeared in his eye sockets soon, and he was relieved after seeing this panel. It would be much easier to have specific details, and the last friendly reminder lifted his spirits even more. As we all know, the level of ninja is different from the strength of ninja. You must know that Naruto Uzumaki was still a ninja during the Fourth World War. In the same way, Uchiha Madara and Senjujima are just Jonin. Linking the ninja level with their own strength is the biggest misunderstanding, and it is also the most deceptive place. It is true that the ninja world has always used chakra reserves and strength to judge a person's approximate ninja level, but this is only for reference. Knowing that a person's chakra is probably in the category of Jounin, then it is necessary to fight with the mentality and preparation to deal with Hunin. This is the most important thing. If you only consider the ninja level, then it is indeed a lot easier. If the system is activated earlier, wouldn't it be fine for me to go directly to the security department? Uchiha Hahara is a mission ninja. Although his talent allowed him to enter the security department, he finally refused. This is a way to protect his reputation, because the security department really stinks in Konoha, and he really doesn't want to step into such a place. But now he also has some regrets, because there is an important place under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Security, and that is Konoha Prison. The authority of the security department is still very large, although the reputation of the Uchiha family has been broken because of the death of the Uchiha family. And Konoha's high-level officials also used this reason to shrink the power of the security department, but from the beginning to the end, Konoha Prison was under the jurisdiction of the security department. Perhaps this is to make the reputation of the security department worse. Konoha has been doing this all these years. Now it's unrealistic for the security department to go to prison. It seems that I can only arrest people myself. Uchiha Habara sighed helplessly. For the sake of his own eyes, he felt that he should go out and arrest people honestly. Thinking of this, Yu Yuan got up and walked out the door, and soon he came to the street. Time is urgent now, and he still has a lot to do, which cannot be delayed at all. As he walked now, he was thinking about who would be better for him to kill. To be honest, the ninja world is so big, but there are really not many Hunin. After all, Jonin is already the strategic resource of the village. There are very few people who are easy to deal with, and there is no qualified Jonin who is easy to deal with, but he thought of a guy Lu King Kui. This kid is in the same class as Uchiha Habara, and he was only a Chunin when he was in Konoha, but after he stole the Thor sword and defected, he got the position of a Jonin. It's not too easy to deal with such a guy, but the biggest problem is that this guy actually ran to Yuyin village. Where is Yuyin village? Is that a place he can go? If he comes and goes, he is dead. If he is in this weak state, isn't it just a gift? It's really troublesome enough. Habara rubbed his brows as he walked. He really has a headache now. Where on earth would he find the 4 Jonin? What's the trouble, Habara? But at this moment, a voice suddenly rang in his ears, which made his body slightly stiff. He cursed secretly in his mind that he didn't pay attention to the surrounding situation because he was thinking about things. If this is the enemy, I'm afraid I will be cold. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. But when he turned his head and saw the person coming, he couldn't help but heaved a sigh of relief, and then showed a smile. It's you, Shishui. You're back. That's right, the person who appeared behind Habara was Shisui Uchiha. Shisui and Habara are in the same class, and they have had a competitive relationship since they were young, but as they get along, Habara finds that Shisui is quite easy to get along with. And compared with Uchiha Itachi, this guy is a world of difference. At least this guy had a relatively weak character and chose to commit suicide after encountering extreme difficulties. Among the village and the family, he did not blindly favor one side. His greatest wish was to maintain the harmony of the village and the family, not to kill the family for the sake of the village. As for Uchiha Itachi, Habara really dislikes this self-righteous guy from the bottom of his heart. Whether it's what he's done to the Uchiha clan, or what he's done to Sasuke, it certainly no longer shows that he always thought he was in control. Yu Yuan had been in contact with him when he was a child, but after he expressed his position and attitude, this kid ignored Yu Yuan. But Shisui is different, he quite approves of Habara's concept of the family and the village are one, which makes the relationship between Habara and Shisui much better. But now that he is forcibly bound by his family, he has no way to escape from birth, and he is even more dissatisfied with Uchiha Itachi's views. As for Shisui, he felt that he had to do something. After all, his philosophy has not gone astray, and he will have a kaleidoscope Sharingan in the future. This guy must be the one I want to fight for. Yes, it's rare to have a vacation, so naturally I have to come back and have a look. Shisui also looked at Yubara with a smile. He didn't know what Yubara was thinking. He just came back from the task today and naturally planned to take a good rest. He originally wanted to find Itachi Uchiha, but it was a pity that Itachi hadn't rested yet. Although both of them belong to the Anbu, there are several brigades in the Anbu, and the bases of each brigade are in different locations. They are not in the same team, and naturally they don't know what the opponent's current situation is, so it is inevitable that sometimes he will come back empty-handed. However, meeting Habara was obviously something that made him feel happy, but what surprised him was that Habara seemed to be troubled by something. "Tell me, what's the matter? We are friends, and it's not that I can't help if I'm in trouble." Actually, there are a lot of troubles. Aren't personal troubles and family troubles all troubles? When Habara heard Shisui's question, he couldn't help but sighed slightly, and his words also changed Shisui's originally happy expression. It was obvious that his face became stiff, and the smile slowly disappeared from his face. "Don't talk about such troublesome things at this time." In the end, there was only a wry smile on Shishui's face. He shook his head and sighed, "Is there a meeting in the family? It's almost the same as entering the market every time. It's really annoying." Habara shook his head, and then he continued, "However, it is foreseeable that those extreme guys may have the upper hand. Although it is less than a year before the final night of genocide, in fact, none of the hawks and doves in the clan has fully grasped the right to speak in the family. There is a guy who has to be said here, and that is Uchiha Fugaku. It is this guy who has always allowed the current Uchiha to maintain a weak balance for the time being, so that the doves and hawks are still fighting each other but neither dominates. But because of what this guy did, the Uchiha clan has never really unified their voices. Moreover, there is another important fuse for Uchiha's rebellion, and that is Danzo. Because Danzo attacked Shisui, who was the representative of Dove faction, and Shisui's death was also the reason why those guys from Dove faction completely defected. But none of this has happened yet, and Habara can do something during this period of time, but it has to be said that the Hawks do have a huge advantage. It is indeed a huge trouble." Shisui sighed deeply. "If the family continues like this, I am afraid it will fall into the abyss." "It is indeed a huge trouble." Shisui sighed deeply. "If the family continues like this, I am afraid it will fall into the abyss. It will indeed step into the abyss. After all, do you still have Itachi?" Hearing Shisui's words, Habara suddenly said meaningfully, "I don't think they don't know anything." Habara's words caused Shisui's face to change slightly. He quickly glanced around, and after making sure that there were no other people around, he was slightly relieved. Of course he knew what Habara meant by them, that is to say, he would look ugly if he knew. And what he and Itachi did, to some extent, betrayed the family. Some things should not be said. Nonsense, Habara. Shisui looked at Habara solemnly, and lowered his voice. "This will cause a lot of trouble, and it is the Patriarch's intention that we enter Enbu." "Of course I know what the Patriarch meant." Habara looked at Shisui with a half-smile. "It's just that I didn't say too much. Why are you so nervous?" "You Shisui felt a little aggrieved by Habara's words, and he didn't know how to respond for a while. Okay, in fact, everyone is not stupid. You can understand some things as open secrets. Habara sighed softly, if you want to obtain information, you must gain trust, and the way to gain trust is to hand over the corresponding information. Intelligence, isn't it? Habara's words made Shisui slightly close his eyes. Of course he could hear that Habara was saying that they were double agents, but what he couldn't deny was that Habara was really right. It's just that the double agent is also biased, which side he is biased to, maybe only they know. However, you actually mentioned the patriarch, so I'm going to ask you a question. Seeing that Shisui was silent, Habara couldn't help showing a smile on his face, and then he asked in a low voice. Patriarch. Shisui opened his eyes, and he looked at Habara curiously, because what Habara said was beating too fast. Forget it, you can ask, if it's just about the patriarch. Do you think the patriarch has great power? The patriarch leads the family, so the power is naturally great. Then, why doesn't he think of a way to calm down the chaos in the family? Habara's question really made Shisui stunned for a moment, and then his face became stunned, and finally began to become a little unbelievable or even shocked. He never dreamed that Habara, the guy who grew up with him, would dare to ask such a question. And obviously, what he said was questioning his patriarch. The patriarch's control and mastery of the family cannot be questioned by others. How dare he ask? How does this make him answer? It's just that Yu Yuan's words also made him start to think involuntarily, why the family is in such a mess, but the patriarch still didn't do anything? Seeing Shisui's sluggish look, Habara knew that his words had definitely caused Shisui to think. In fact, Shisui has never been stupid, but he can't see many things at all, or his vision hinders his perspective of observing the world. And Yu Yuan is a time traveler. Before time travel, he studied politics in high school and went to Maogai, Majet, and Sishu in college. His vision is really not comparable to that of Shisui. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. In other words, apart from his ability to be investigated, his vision is definitely not worse than any shadow in the ninja world. This is the advantage of the Traverser, which comes from the high-latitude crushing of vision and knowledge. I think you also know that he does have the power to unite the family, but look at the current family. In addition to the poor handling within the family, if you look at the relationship between the family and the village, is it getting worse and worse? A family naturally needs to be united to avoid internal friction. Only by unifying all opinions and thinking can one thing be done better. Shisui, think about it carefully, if the voice of the clan is suppressed by him, there will not be so many disputes. And his heart is towards Konoha, will someone stop him? Will the relationship between the family and the village be so bad? Speaking of which, Habara is the real picture. See you. Although he is very clear that the problems of the Uchiha clan are not only caused by the actions of Uchiha Fugaku, but he is indeed one of the main drivers of Uchiha's demise. But things have to be done step by step. First give Shisui a concept to make him doubt, and then the real surprise will come next. Actually, I have always felt that there are only two people who can really change the family. Two. Shisui is still a little dizzy now, he looked at Habara in astonishment, his words kept echoing in his mind. Yes, two people. Habara's smile became brighter at this moment, he pointed at Shisui with his finger, and then pointed at himself. One is you and the other is me. It's a pity that there are no green plums now, and they are on the street, otherwise Habara really wants to talk about the patriarch with green plums cooking wine. But his words are still full of impact. Uchiha Shisui is completely numb now. Habara is still very happy to see his sluggish expression. If his own words can't make Shisui produce inner fluctuations, then this means that his approach has failed. In fact, strictly speaking, it is really risky to talk to Shisui about these things, but he is forcibly bound to the family by the system, so he just needs to make a decision as soon as possible. Although less than a year seems like a lot, Habara is almost starting from nothing. It only takes a year to grow from scratch, so it seems that he really can't do it if he is not in a hurry. Habara, do you know what you're talking about? But at this very moment, Zishui finally woke up. He looked around almost immediately to see if there were people around. After really confirming that they were in a safe environment, he said to Habara with a serious and even ugly expression. Your thoughts are dangerous, really too dangerous, you. Am I not right? Before Shisui finished speaking, Habara interrupted him directly. Although Habara's voice was still very low, there was an unprecedented determination. You and I are young, we both have energy and drive, and we both have the same goal. Although our two goals are somewhat different, at least we both hope that the family and the village can coexist peacefully. But look at how far the relationship between the family and the village has deteriorated under the leadership of Uchiha Fugaku. Zishui, your identity is the most special, you should see it most clearly. Zishui gritted his teeth, he seemed to want to refute, but he couldn't say a word. Because he himself knew that he had accepted Habara's words in his heart, and it could even be said that his heart had already begun to shake at this time. This is a dangerous signal, as a ninja Shisui is very clear, but Habara's words are deeply buried in his heart, so that he can't forget it at all. Could it be that everything is the patriarch's problem? As long as the patriarch is changed or even changed to a better patriarch, can everything be solved? After a long time, Shishui's expression calmed down, he stared at Yubara firmly, and finally asked slowly, so, if you were the patriarch, what would you do? Zishui, have you noticed that your perspective on problems is really narrow? At this moment, Habara gave up a little bit, he sighed slightly, and then he spoke slowly. In fact, both you and I know what to do as a patriarch, but the extent to which it should be done depends on the village's attitude. Having said that, Habara suddenly turned in a different direction, and he led Shisui towards the forest behind the family. The forest behind the Uchiha clan is a deserted training ground, and the guy who used to train here was the guy with soil. But it's a pity that this place has become even more desolate after he left, but this is cheaper. Now Habara, he likes to come to this place for training on weekdays. It can be said that this place is almost becoming his private base, and he is not afraid of being noticed by others when speaking here. What do you mean by that? After Zishui observed for 4 weeks, he finally said the question he had been wanting to ask. What does it mean to look at the village's statement? After we become patriarchs, do we still have problems handling the relationship with the village? That's why I said that your thinking is a bit narrow, Ji Shui. Habara smiled casually, but soon his smile began to hide, and he looked serious. The family and the village are one, and this cannot be changed anyway. Do you know what the biggest criticism of the Uchiha clan is now? Criticism? Zishui shook his head lightly. Although he could see more things after entering Anbu, just because he could see it didn't mean he could understand the meaning. It's like he couldn't understand why the guy named Shimura Danzo hated Uchiha so much in his roots. It can be said that seeing and understanding are really two different things. I can tell you very clearly that it is the Ministry of Security. Habara sighed faintly. He originally thought that he would never reveal these secrets, and that he could use them to abduct this kid when he met Suzuki after defecting for a long time. But now he has to take it out to try to persuade Zishui. The main job of the security department is to maintain the law and order and stability inside Konoha Ninja Village. At the same time, it is also responsible for formulating the laws of the village, strengthening and maintaining the order and security of Konoha Hidden Village, and arresting criminals and ninjas. To be honest, what Uchiha did is not too bad at this point, but do you know why the reputation of the security department is so bad? I don't know. Shisui shook his head, then looked at Habara seriously and waited for his answer. I'm afraid he didn't realize it, but now he looks more like a student full of thirst for knowledge. Actually, we have to talk about our second Hokage, because the Konoha police department he established is the root of everything. In name, This important department was handed over to Uchiha, but in fact, the Uchiha clan was given the role of punishing evil. And in the name of monitoring criminals, the police department and the prison were built together, so that the Uchiha clan was blatantly driven to the corner of Konoha Ninja Village. After all, Uchiha Madara appeared in our family back then, and the purpose of the second Hokage was to monitor Uchiha. It is also to prevent the next Uchiha Madara from being able to deal with it immediately. In his opinion, it is better to protect Konoha more completely. Speaking of this, Habara paused slightly, but Shisui's expression had completely changed at this time. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. He knows who Uchiha Madara is, and he has also heard the story of the former patriarch. He even knew that in the Uchiha clan, there were still many followers of Uchiha Madara. The third Hokage and its core team are basically disciples of the second Hokage, and they have always firmly followed the philosophy of the second Hokage. Before Shisui completely absorbed these words, Habara spoke again, and this time his words made Shisui's heart sink to the bottom. Under this concept, Konoha will not trust Uchiha from the beginning to the end, especially after the Kyuubi incident. This distrust has become more serious. Just look at the current situation of Uchiha. In a sense, the current Uchiha is forced by them. And it is a coincidence that we have met such a patriarch, and our fate can be imagined. Speaking of this, Habara really sighed, and then he looked at Shisui seriously, but Shisui seemed to be in a daze. That's why I said, if we overthrow Fugaku Uchiha, we still need to look at the attitude of the village. But we, who have unified the opinions within the family, are definitely more fearsome than a scattered family. At least our attitude cannot be ignored by Konoha. Even, as long as we do well enough and have enough voice, we can even become Hokage through our own efforts. Habara looked silent on the surface, but there seemed to be a little fiery Shisui flashing in his eyes. He smiled and patted his shoulder heavily. So, with this group of insects, how can we manage the family well? We have to believe in ourselves. In fact, there is still one sentence that Habara has not said, that is, how can I manage Konoha well with these insects? But that's not important anymore. What's important is that he can seize Shui's current state. Habara's words were very provocative, and although Shisui didn't speak, the way he looked at Habara had changed. To put it bluntly, Habara's words completely changed many of Shisui's inner thoughts. Although there are many violent theories instilled at one time, all of them are reasonable and can definitely withstand deep thought. After all, he is a time traveler. After reading the plot of the original novel, he stands on a commanding height and overlooks everything. Although Shui's character is desperate at critical moments, he is also a smart person. He chose to commit suicide only when he saw that there was nothing to be done. And as an Anbu, if his brain is really bad, it is impossible to get in. And as Anbi, he has access to a lot of information. He is quietly reviewing the information in his mind and comprehending it in combination with Habara's words. He sadly found that what Habara said was all the truth, and such a fact also caused a severe shock to his heart. Judging from his subsequent state, this guy seemed to be struggling a bit, and Habara knew that there was no need to instill any violence with this guy at this time. What he has to do now is to take a good rest, and then adjust his state. The most important thing is to adjust his mentality. Just like this, I don't have to think about going out to pick up the task today. Habara sighed silently, and then he simply sent Shisui back home, and then returned to his own residence. Habara's home is a relatively spacious two-bedroom bungalow. His parents died during World War III, and this house was left to him by his parents. Moreover, as a relatively talented member of the family, Habara can obtain a lot of materials, so this small bungalow is full of materials he has read. But this room doesn't look messy at all, because he also has a privilege, that is, the family will arrange someone to clean the room for him. He doesn't need to worry about this aspect at all, he just needs to cultivate with peace of mind, even if he hasn't chosen to join any family camp yet. It can be said that Habara's original life was good, but this kind of life is still less than a year away. If he wants to continue to maintain or even get a better life, and at the same time find a way to save his own life, then he must work hard to do something. Sure enough, people only seem to work extra hard when it's for their own lives. Lying on the bed, Habara began to think about what kind of reaction Shisui would have, exactly what choice he would make. And even if he doesn't consider Shisui, he has to think about how to drive Uchiha Fugaku away. There are actually only two ways to get rid of Uchiha Fugaku. One is to solve the problem peacefully. But it is clear that within the Uchiha clan, it has always been difficult to resolve problems peacefully. This group of psychopaths has always been a representative of high self-esteem. If you want to reason with them, you must first make them think that you have the qualifications to reason with them. And how to get such a qualification? Very simple, that is relying on fists. It is useless for the future Naruto to persuade Sasuke no matter what, but when he changed his way and beat Sasuke in the final battle of the Broken Hand, the problem was solved immediately, without even needing Naruto to say anything. Sasuke himself had surrendered himself and become obedient. It seems that the only way to get Uchiha Fugaku to leave is through some violent methods. Habara murmured to himself, in fact, if he has time, it is not impossible for him to start from the security department. Then recruit all the people who can be recruited to form a new alliance of interests, and look for opportunities to assassinate the most extreme people. Assassination is not the best solution, but sometimes killing some people through assassination, such as the spiritual leader of the other party, will have a different effect. Because these guys are often the most important person in an interest group, they know what their political demands are, and they will also come up with their own program of action. With these two things in the same mind, then they let the people under them be quiet, and everyone will be quiet. Once he makes the people under him take up arms, the consequences will be disastrous. The lighthouse on the other side of the ocean took down the Black Panther Party, that is to kill their true spiritual leader and disintegrate them from the inside. This is how the once popular Black Panther Party turned into a group of loose sand without clear political appeals and action programs, and finally became a Hollywood punctuation mark. But maybe I will do this kind of thing in the future, but Uchiha Fugaku is the biggest trouble. Does he have a kaleidoscope Sharingan? Whether Uchiha Fugaku has kaleidoscope Sharingan is indeed a very troublesome matter, and he does not seem to show any traces in the original manga. But in Itachi Shinden, he showed his kaleidoscope in front of Uchiha Itachi. Habara didn't know which world this world was, but he felt that he had to prepare for the worst, and that was when this guy had a kaleidoscope Sharingan. And this guy has a kaleidoscope, so he has to be more careful no matter what. So, I have to open my eyes as soon as possible, no matter what. I will go out tomorrow, and then gather 4 jounin. Habara thought to himself, but at this moment, he suddenly found that the system panel jumped out of his retina again. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the initial approval of Uchiha Shisui. Uchiha Shisui was awakened by the host's words. He has begun to realize the problems within the family, as well as the problems of the family and the village. Although he hasn't spoken yet, he will choose to help you with certain things. Seeing this scene, Habara was stunned for a moment, and then he couldn't help showing a happy expression on his face. It's great to get Zishui's approval, even if it's just a preliminary approval. Kansha www.uuganshu.com because everyone is sensitive and full of doubts. It is not a bad thing to have doubts, because there is a sense of expectation when there are doubts, and when the doubts are broken step by step, what you get is the most complete. It seems that Zishui needs further training to further expand his vision, so that he can help me more. Habara was overjoyed. Although he didn't know whether Shisui had opened the kaleidoscope Sharingan, at least he got it in the original book. This also means that Habara has the support of a ninja who owns a kaleidoscope in the future, so how could he not feel happy? What made him feel even more happy was that it also followed, because his system panel changed again. Current binding, Uchiha clan current status, extremely bad. The family is in a state of serious division, and there are villains looking around from the outside. Prosperity, 9848, normal family base prosperity is 10,000, suggestion, end the state of family division as soon as possible, stabilize the internal environment of the family, and unite those who can unite to face difficulties together. Congratulations to the host for earning 1,000 points, 1,000 points can get 1. Ability extraction dancing in the sky, can use chakra to fly in the sky. Fire burning, you can get fire escape. Flame burning, the flames quickly spread around and cause damage to nearby enemies, there is no fire escape attribute that can be obtained through skills. Hurricane howling, you can get wind escape. Hurricane howling, change the air pressure and temperature, and can summon a small storm in a small area, the more chakra the storm can increase in size, there is no wind escape. Attribute, you can get it through skills. Dancing Kongshu again. Looking at this times 1 of 3 rewards, although Habara was very happy, he was still relatively calm. After all, I have already experienced it twice a day, and it is difficult to get excited. Besides, the rewards this time are not as rich as the first time. In any case, the first time he got the thing of glorious evolution, it was destined that his Sharingan could evolve to a kaleidoscopic level. I'm afraid that what can still excite him now is something of a higher level, right? Of course, this is just what he thinks about. Although he has obtained the passive of glorious evolution at this stage, he has not fully used this passive. Thinking about higher level things is basically just a dream, and the most important thing is to deal with everything in front of you. As for the choice this time, there is actually nothing too good to choose. As a Uchiha, he is good at fire escape, so he doesn't plan to get the skill fire burning. Although the effect seems to be very good, it is not that Habara has other alternatives, such as Huomi, but he can't learn. The power of Huohuoquen is indeed very powerful, but in fact it is only a Blevel or Clevel ninjutsu. Its strength and power are completely linked to chakra, which means that the more chakra you inject, the more powerful it can explode. And hurricane whistling is indeed not bad. Habara is good at fire escape and earth escape, but he really doesn't have the ability of wind escape. But compared to being able to fly freely in the sky, he feels that things like Feng Dun can't be put down a little bit. What's more, Wukong has appeared twice. If you don't take it, it's really unreasonable. There is no doubt that Yubara's choice this time is Wukong, and the feeling of flying in the sky is probably something that no one would want to miss. Unless there are more difficult options, such as evolving one's own eyes. After getting this technique, Habara couldn't wait to go to the forest behind Uchiha to experiment again after dark. I have to say that the feeling of flying freely is really great, but Habara also noticed that this technique does not consume too little chakra. With his current chakra reserves, he can fly for an hour at a slow speed, but he might not be able to last 5 minutes at a fast speed. Flying also needs to consider the situation in the sky, and the various effects caused by rapid flight are also great, but it is enough for me now. Habara is still very content. Wukong Jutsu is another life-saving ability for him. After all, there are very few people in the entire ninja world who can fly. To put it bluntly, unless he meets guys like Pain and Onoki in the later stage, no one else can catch up to him if he wants to run away. In order not to attract too much attention, Habara honestly returned to her residence after experimenting a bit. After a good night's rest, he chose to go directly to the mission center early the next morning. To hunt and kill Jonin naturally requires a suitable reason to leave the village, so it is the best choice to accept the task and complete it. At the same time, he also intends to see if there is any Konoha rebellion worthy of his pursuit. It would be great if he meets a suitable target. Hey! Zishui! What Habara didn't expect was that he ran into Shisui just after he left the house. At this moment, he seemed a little tired, his eyes were red as if he had read Sharingan, but it was obvious that this was the result of his lack of rest. Although Habara already knew through the system that Shisui had initially recognized him, he never expected that this guy would be so entangled. After all, in Habara's view, there seems to be nothing worth entangled with. The actions of the village and the inaction within the family have led to the current Uchiha. As long as you see the essence of this matter clearly, it is easy and simple to understand. As for the entanglement, Habara, good morning. Zishui seemed a little mentally ill, but at this time he was still very serious, and he said straight to the point. I thought about it all night. Although I agree with your thoughts and opinions in principle, but... Stop, this is not the place to talk, and I have something to do, we will talk slowly later. Habara immediately stopped Shisui, telling him to keep talking nonsense, who knows if there are ears behind the walls. Habara doesn't have the ability to perceive ninjas. If someone really hears it, then they don't have to think about anything, and they don't have to play anything. Honestly, wait for Uchiha Attack to lift the butcher knife, and let's die together with Obito and Danzo's roots. Zishui also came to his senses this time, although he showed a little remorse. He knew that he had done something he shouldn't have done, and if Habara hadn't reacted too quickly, he might have gotten into trouble. But soon he looked at Habara with some doubts, because he noticed what Habara said. Is there something? Zishui asked curiously, is there a mission? Not yet, but I plan to take on some tasks. Habara shook his head slightly, the family is too depressing, and I am very resistant to such meetings, and at the same time I plan to think carefully about how I will go about it next. I did. You reading www.yukansha.com thinking about what to do. Habara didn't make it clear at all, but Shisui understood what he meant in an instant. And he also had to admit that the environment within the family was indeed very bad. Especially after listening to Habara's words yesterday, he thought carefully all night and found that it was really the same as what he said. Although Habara's words were very unpleasant, it seemed to be the case. With those insects, how can we manage the family well? They didn't trace the source of the problem at all. What's ridiculous is that they even once thought that the Ministry of Security was a sweet potato. But in fact, this is a reminder, this is a tool to make the family and Konoha drift away, this is an institution that makes Uchiha fall. The family has changed, and Konoha doesn't trust the family at all, and it's really up to them to change all this. Suddenly, Zishui realized that he had always underestimated his friend and classmate. They competed together and grew up together, and were hailed as the geniuses of the family together. But I fell into an abyss and quagmire without hesitation, and my good friend has been staying out of it. But it's what he did that allowed him to see everything clearly and let him know where Uchiha's shortcomings are. He is the most sober person in this family. Thinking of this, Zishui has made a psychological decision, but he still needs to think and observe carefully before he finally speaks out his decision. Like, Habara, let me go with you on this mission. Hey? What did you say? I said I would go with you, because only in this way can I know more. Habara didn't expect that Shisui would actually plan to carry out missions with him. However, what he didn't even expect was that after Shisui reported this matter, the old man Sarutobi Hiruzen actually agreed. It was understandable that Zishui wanted to follow him, after all, he still had a lot of questions to ask, and a lot of things he wanted to know. But as Anbu, it is really not easy for him to leave the village at will, especially now that Uchiha's situation is getting more and more complicated. But the reality often exceeds Habara's expectations, and Sarutobi Hiruzen really agreed to Shisui, which made Habara start to think about Sarutobi Hiruzen's thoughts. Is it possible that someone is following and intends to see what they are going to do? Habara thought maliciously in his heart, but after thinking about it carefully, he seemed to understand that this was probably Hiruza Sarutobi's way of winning people's hearts. Shisui's current performance is completely loyal to Sarutobi Hiruzen and Konoha, and his special status makes him very stressed. And he knows the internal situation of the Uchiha clan. In such a stressful and depressing environment, it is natural to want to go out with friends. And Habara himself has behaved pretty well in terms of personality since he was a child, and he behaved fairly friendly to everyone in Konoha. He doesn't have the inexplicable arrogance unique to Uchiha, even if ordinary people are in trouble, he will help if he can. Such a person is fundamentally different from other Uchihas no matter how you look at it. I am afraid that Hiruzuru Sarutobi will think that he is a person with the will of fire. Of course, if only this is not enough. After all, Sarutobi Hiruzen is the same as the second Hokage. In fact, he doesn't believe in Uchiha at all, but Shisui is not the only card in his hand. He also has Uchiha Ataki, which is probably the reason why he agreed to let Shisui come out to relax, so that Shisui can feel trusted, and he is not afraid that if something goes wrong, he will have no one in his hands. After thinking about all this clearly, Yu Yuan also felt a little relieved. At least he didn't need to worry about people following behind him, making him dare not say some things casually. However, the third Hokage is really generous, actually giving you a month to relax. Walking on the main road, Habara couldn't help turning his head and glanced at Shisui beside him. He asked curiously. "Are you really okay after you've been away for so long?" "It's not because of you, but I want to thank you very much." Shisui shook his head lightly, and then he spoke plainly. "If it wasn't for the fact that you have taken on so many inexplicable missions, you would have even asked me to obtain information through the channels of the Anbu. As a result, Master Hokage finally found out, and I may not have that long." Habara didn't take these words to heart at all. Even if Sarutobi Hiruzen knew some details, he didn't care. Because he really wanted to find trouble with some Jainin or even traitorous nin, he didn't worry about being investigated at all. In fact, it is also an unspoken rule to conduct intelligence through dark channels. After all, the intelligence information obtained by Anbu may be more reliable than that obtained by the client, and this time Shisui will follow. So as long as it doesn't violate the rules, Shisui can come up with some information for them to use together. What's more, if Anbu has more detailed information about the tasks that have been posted in the mission center, he will submit them to the mission department according to the process. Unless some tasks are intended to be used by students to practice, so these tasks will not be disclosed in more detail. For example, for a mission in the Land of Waves, Habara would not believe that Konoha did not have more specific information, and he would not believe Kakashi's slightly clumsy performance at all. The speed of both of them is not slow, and it didn't take long for them to be some distance away from Konoha. Their mission goals this time are basically rebellious ninjas, and the level of these rebellious ninjas is not low, and they are all rebellious ninjas from other villages. It is also very interesting to say, that is, the general ninja village does not have much information on the village's rebellion. Although it sounds ironic, this is a fact, or it is true of the entire ninja world. When there is rebellion in a village, generally they seldom stay in the country where their village is located. Things like being black under the lights are not suitable for Anbu. And once they ran to other countries and were discovered by other villages, as long as this guy didn't do anything excessive in this place, then these villages will also protect them to a certain extent and will not leak their information. However, this kind of protection is not really good for these traitors. If the traitor is strong, then you can contact them and get information from them. If the strength is weak and has little intelligence value, then keep disgusting the village he defected from. Or in a future exchange of benefits, hand him over to show sincerity. To put it bluntly, rebellious ninja is really not that easy to be. Similarly, the rebellious ninja in your own village is often the most difficult to catch, and once you catch it, the end will be very ugly. Speaking of which, why do you want to engage in such jounin? After leaving for a certain distance, Shisui raised his own question. Although we can leave Konoha for a long time, I think you should still have more ideas, right? Just treat it as a process of training. Habara chuckled, and then he said, after all, I also need to exercise hard, and as I said, I also need to think hard. Can I ask you a question? Shisui was silent for a while, and then he asked softly, if, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com I mean, if, after you become the patriarch, what would you do? What if? Patriarch. Hearing Shisui's question, Habara couldn't help showing a smile. after I become patriarch, the first thing I will do is to integrate the whole family." Habara paused slightly when he said this, then he raised his head to look at the sky, and then he spoke slowly. "The family can have many voices, after all everyone has different ideas, but there is one thing that must be done. That is, both thought and will must be unified. Only in this way can we unite as one to accomplish what we need to accomplish. But this is not enough, we need a complete political appeal and action program. Only in this way can we let all the clansmen know what we want to do and what we want to get, instead of being silly and aimless at all." After saying this, Habara withdrew his gaze and looked at Shisui, then he stretched out his hand and patted Shisui's shoulder heavily. "Any action must have a clear goal, and our goal can be divided into 2 stages. One is to keep the family from civil strife so that we can live in peace and stability. And the other is to let the whole Konoha hear our voice, let them know that we don't want Konoha to fall into civil strife. More importantly, let them know that we Uchiha are always in Konoha, we never left." Habara's words were sonorous and powerful, but Shisui's heart was surging when he heard it. Yes, although Uchiha and Konoha are drifting away, their goal is to come back after all, because they have never left. The 2 concepts of political appeal and action program are unfamiliar to Shisui, and I am afraid that they may also be unfamiliar to most people in the ninja world. Even if they are already doing this, they probably don't even have these 2 concepts. Just like the Xia organization, they have clear political appeals and action plans. Their appeal is to hope for peace in the ninja world, and their program of action is to force the ninja world to unite through force deterrence, thereby forming a peaceful situation. Although their internal voices are completely different, after all, the people who join the Xia organization basically have their own ghosts. But it is undeniable that under the leadership of Nagato, they did follow all this. Today, after Yubara clearly expressed these 2 concepts, Shisui's eyes were filled with shock and admiration. From Shisui's point of view, Habara, who can clearly put forward these 2 concepts, probably has indeed done enough homework. He is very clear about what he wants to do and what he wants to get. Such a clear concept made Shisui's admiration for Habara even deeper. "It seems that my thinking is indeed too narrow, Habara has already stood at a higher level." After getting these 2 concepts, Shisui didn't ask Habara what he did. Because in his opinion, the information he got is enough for the time being, and now he needs to absorb everything he got. And he also wanted to think about it, if he was the patriarch, he would be under the double pressure of the family and the village. How will he do it, what will be his political demands, and what will be his program of action? This fellow Shisui calmed down, so Habara was naturally happy, because he was afraid that Shisui would not be able to bear it any longer. The kid asked himself what to do as the patriarch, but the question was how else could he do it? You can't tell Zishui that all the obedient ones will stay, and those who are disobedient will be sent to the Pure Land, right? Although this kind of thing, maybe before he became the patriarch, he would probably do something to some extreme guys. Especially those spiritual leaders, these guys are the most dangerous existence. If they don't recognize their ideas, and blindly want to use extreme methods to realize their ideals without knowing the current affairs, then Habara really has no choice. So there are some things that I haven't fully prepared for, so it's better not to ask too much. In the following time, both of them entered the state of hurrying, although Zishui would still ask some questions from time to time. But these questions couldn't be bothered by Habara, who had some systematic education in his previous life. His answers were straightforward and precise, and Shisui would gain a lot every time. Along the way, Habara found that the way Shisui looked at him was not quite right, the admiring eyes could not be hidden at all. But Zishui had no choice but to ask now, because after a long journey, they finally arrived at the border between the land of fire and the land of Tang. It should be found, it's here. Their target was Union's rebellious Ren. This guy was not weak and was very good at lightning escape, the reason for his defection was unknown. When this guy entered the border of Yuno country, Konoha Anbi had already discovered him, but no one had planned to deal with this guy before that. But this guy is not a peaceful person, he forcibly occupied a village, and even shot at passing merchants. Such a situation naturally caused panic among the merchants, so these merchants also handed over this task to Konoha, hoping that Konoha would handle it. And this task Habara also got more information through Shisui's channel in Anbu, and he was Habara's first target. It's just that when the two of them approached the village, the two of them involuntarily showed a look of vigilance. It was too quiet, it didn't look like what a normal village should have at all, and this quietness was accompanied by a vague smell of blood. There may be an accident in this village. It seems that we are not the only ones who still arrest him. Zishui said in a low voice, and he had already quietly pulled out kunao. Well, I'm afraid someone got there first. Habara's expression was very ugly at this time, this was his goal. And this is the key for him to open the kaleidoscope. He was robbed of his head for no reason. How did he accept it? Tell me, could it be someone from Union? Habara forced himself to calm down, and suddenly asked softly, after all, it's their traitor. If it's Union, it will be troublesome. In fact, Zishui had already thought of Union in his mind, which made his face look uneasy. The relationship between Union and Konoha is very bad, not to mention that the second Hokage died in their hands, and they attacked Konoha in the third battle. Just 5 years ago, they threatened Konoha with the threat of war, and getting Konoha to hand over Hinata was enough to bring their relationship to a freezing point. Although Hyuga Hyazuru was fine, because the body of Hyuga Hyasashi was handed over, but this also caused a huge impact on Konoha's image in the ninja world. And Union also gained infinite glory by virtue of this action, which made them surpass Konoha in one fell swoop to become the #1 ninja village in the ninja world, both in name and in fact. To put it bluntly, Union stepped on the leaves, so it would be strange if the relationship between the two parties can be good. I think it would be better if it is someone from Union. Habara suddenly said in a low voice, you must know that this is the country of soup. You mean? Shisui couldn't help being slightly stunned when he heard Habara's words, and then he seemed to be a little moved, but what if it is discovered? Then handle it more cleanly. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Seeing Shisui's appearance, Habara knew that this was feasible, and he spoke after serious thinking for a moment. First find out how many of them there are, and then you quickly kill those guys who are not strong enough. I will restrain their jonin, wait for you to deal with them and come back to help me. Hearing this opportunity, Zishui couldn't help thinking, and soon he nodded heavily. After all, it is a person who has experienced the cruelty of war on the battlefield. Even though Zishui is a pacifist, he is not a pedantic person. After making a decision, they also started to act. When they entered the edge of the village, they were even more determined to kill these guys. These beasts. There are many corpses on the ground in the village, whether men, women, old or young, collapsed in a pool of blood on the ground. And from the way they died, it can be seen that they wanted to escape at that time, but it's a pity that the person who did it didn't give them a chance to escape. And at this moment, there are still people who are moving their bodies to the center of the village. I'm afraid they need to be destroyed in a centralized manner. Seeing this scene, Zishui couldn't help cursing inwardly, but he still restrained himself from making a move. What they have to do now is to find out how many people there are on the other side. Only in this way can they kill all these guys with more confidence. After some waiting and investigation, Habara and Shisui basically confirmed that there were only 4 ninjas acting here this time. It's just that they also found one thing that gave them a headache, because the guy who led the team was not a simple thing. If I'm not mistaken, that guy seems to be the owner of Union Magnetic Dun, and his name is Troy. In fact, Troy is rarely mentioned in the original book. I am afraid that the only highlight is that he was summoned by the pharmacist. But Habara knew him, because this guy came to Konoha a few years ago, and that time their target was Hinata. Habara even heard that during the Third Ninja World War, This guy caused a lot of trouble for many Konoha ninjas on the battlefield of Uno country. To put it bluntly, this is a guy who is rarely mentioned in the original work, but he is indeed a guy with extraordinary strength. Meeting this guy Habara also gave me a headache. Magnetic escape is really not an easy ability to deal with, because he can use magnetic escape to control the opponent's weapons. Any iron weapon, whether it is kunai or shinobi, cannot escape such control. And once he uses this ability, the weapon in the opponent's own hand suddenly attacks him. One can imagine how tragic this situation will be. It turned out to be this guy. This is really a big fish. Habara said in a low voice. His gaze has also changed slightly. Although the appearance of this group of guys caused him to lose a goal, why couldn't they make up for his loss? It's still going according to the original plan. Such a big fish can't let him escape. Be careful, I will come back to support you as soon as possible. Shisui didn't object, but said to Habara seriously. It could be seen that he seemed very worried about Habara's safety. I don't know who will support who when the time comes. Habara smiled and nodded in a low voice, and then his eyes locked on Troy, and his eyes turned into scarlet three-pointed jade in an instant. Fire escape Fire Phoenix Immortal Art. When everything was ready, Yu Yuan took the lead to seal the attack. He directly chose the technique with the widest range. As for the effect of this technique, he didn't know, but after investigation, there were 4 people on the opposite side. Since there are many people on the other side, the chances of being recruited are much higher if you choose this wide area coverage technique. Hey! Be careful, there are enemy attacks. The response speed of these Union ninjas was also extremely fast, especially Troy, who immediately noticed that something was wrong. Under his prompt, all the Cloud ninjas responded. They either formed seals quickly, or turned around and avoided immediately. Superior. After Union's formation was broken up, Habara and Shisui also rushed out of the hiding place at this moment. The scarlet Sharingans in their eyes glanced left and right, and quickly determined the exact location of those Cloud ninjas. Without any excessive communication, Shisui moved towards those Cloud ninjas who were dodging in all directions with a blink of an eye. NU principal locked on Troy, and he quickly stuck it up with a brisk step. The moment Troy just landed, his fist had already smashed hard. Troy reacted quickly, and he countered almost immediately. He crossed his hands in front of his chest, and blocked Habara's punch at the critical moment. Uchiha. Troy noticed Habara's scarlet eyes immediately, so he subconsciously turned his gaze away from Habara's eyes. But his tone was not so friendly, it could even be said to be full of anger. What do you want to do? Start a war? War? You don't have to say that. This is not the country of fire, nor is it your country of thunder. Habara didn't like this guy, he stopped quickly, and then he kicked Troy's lower body fiercely. However, as soon as he was halfway through his movements, he realized that something was wrong. He stopped his feet almost instantly and used a substitute technique at the same time. There was a sound of breaking wind, but it was a pity that there were only a few pieces of wood left on the ground, and Habara's figure had already appeared under the big tree not far away. Substitution technique, which is one of the most basic 3-body techniques for ninjas, is often the most life-saving technique. Is the reaction really fast? Troy glanced at the broken wood on the ground, then turned his head to look at Habara's position. Boy, you are very good, and your eyes are also very good. With eyes like this at your age, you must not be an unknown person. You are Uchiha Habara, right? It's my lord. Habara nodded lightly, he didn't feel any surprise that his identity was recognized. In the final analysis, Habara himself is a genius ninja of the Uchiha clan, and he has been performing missions all these years, so he still has some reputation in the ninja world. Being recognized wasn't much of a surprise, and he knew very well that now wasn't the time to worry about such things. As a qualified ninja, the most important thing is to get rid of distracting thoughts when fighting. Only by concentrating on fighting can you win. It really is you, I have to say that you Uchihas are really special. Troy seemed to be a little emotional. He stared at Habara and said indifferently, after you get your Sharingan, you can have qualitative the change, God really favors you. It's really boring remarks. Habara still stared at Troy, but at this time he had already begun to throw away all the metal utensils on his body. God will not give you strength for nothing. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com. If you take it for granted, then you are really not far from death. Maybe, but I'm really curious about your Uchiha's power. Troy's eyes were dimmed, and a disdainful smile appeared on his face. Also, throwing away the metal can indeed limit some of my performance, but... Without any warning, several kunao appeared behind Habara in an instant, and these kunao quickly swept across his body and pierced his heart. At the same time, he himself had already arrived in front of Yubara in an instant, and he punched Yubara hard. How are you going to face me without a weapon? There was a roar of fists, but in an instant Troy already felt that something was wrong with his hands. And the smoke that came out later also let him know that this Uchiha used a substitute technique. However, he didn't care too much about it. After all, he was a genius boy of Uchiha, and he already had a Sangui riding wheel at a young age. It is only natural to have such a reaction speed. After all, his actions are likely to be seen by him. Quickly took out a scroll, and Troy tore the scroll open. For a moment, dozens of shurikens like square pieces appeared with thick smoke. These shurikens were suspended under his control, and one by one began to rotate slightly. And Troy also began to seriously search for Habara's location, and after a moment he showed a smile. Got you! With Troy's roar, those square shurikens seemed to have received an order, and they quickly flew towards Habara's hidden position. A house was instantly destroyed by these shurikens. The power is really good, and the effect is better when used with a sneak attack. Habara, who was flying in the sky, looked at the scene below quietly, and he couldn't help but sigh with emotion, but his emotion seemed more like a joke. Now that he already knew Troy's ability to inherit blood, he would naturally pay close attention to this guy's every move. Before this guy controlled Kunao to launch a sneak attack behind him, Habara had already noticed the faint chakra fluctuations on him. Therefore, the moment the chakra fluctuations in this guy's body began to become stronger, Habara had already used the substitute technique. However, his movements were still a little slower, and his shoulders were hung by Troy's kunao. But this didn't hurt him at all, on the contrary, it allowed him to play Troy around like he is now. Because after he changed his position using the substitute technique, he noticed that there were some special and hidden chakra left on his body. Ninjas don't do meaningless things. Obviously, this guy has a purpose in keeping these chakras. I'm afraid this is to track my location, and then use the characteristics of magnetic escape to attack me. Habara had already guessed what this guy was thinking at the time. Therefore, he decisively took off his shirt that was stained with this guy's chakra at the moment when the substitute technique was hidden. Afterwards, he separated a shadow clone and handed him his shirt, while he himself used the Wukong technique to secretly observe all this in midair. He doesn't fly very high, and he hides his figure behind a house, so he doesn't need to worry about being seen. Of course, even being seen is not a big deal. Habara has never felt that Wukong is a technique that cannot be exposed. Although flying ninjutsu is extremely scarce in the ninja world, it is not without it, not to mention that there were guys like Kong ninjutsu who appeared many years ago. Therefore, although Habara's technique is rare, it is definitely not a big problem to use it. What's more, his goal is to be the patriarch of the family, and he even has greater ambitions, so it is very necessary to show that he has sufficient ability and strength. His eyes turned slightly, and soon he found that the battle on Zishui's side was coming to an end. I have to say that Zishui's personal strength is really powerful, especially in terms of speed. He is so fast that it is suffocating. His blinking technique is very strange. Even Habara, who has Sharingan, must be extremely focused to distinguish at which moment, which afterimage caused by his blinking technique is his ontology. Being able to use the instantaneous body technique to an effect similar to that of the shadow clone, and even more weird than the shadow clone, this is Zishui's unique ability. Under the crush of his speed, these cloud ninjas who are also good at speed have no way to parry at all. One cloud ninja has already been killed by him, and another cloud ninja has also been injured by him. In fact, the strength of these cloud ninjas is definitely not bad, even if they are not Anbu but can come to participate in the mission of chasing and killing the rebel ninjas, their strength will not be weak no matter how you look at it. It's just that they met Uchiha who restrained them too much, and the physical skills and speed they were proud of were really not enough in front of Sharingan. However, my speed has to be accelerated. Troy is troubled by magnetic escape, but he has no information about me, so. Habara's eyes were dimmed, and Habara's shadow clone below had been cornered by Troy's shuriken, but Troy remained vigilant. He didn't move forward too much, because he didn't want to face Habara's pair of Sharingan with 3 God Jade. Standing in the distance, while manipulating the shuriken to attack, he was constantly feeling the chakra left on this Uchiha ninja. And after several confirmations, he couldn't help but nodded secretly. This kid still has his own chakra, so there should be no problem. But he still has to be careful, once the ninja is careless, he is not far from death. With a wave of his hands, 2 square shurikens came to his hands. The rest of the shurikens stabbed towards Habara as quickly as a magnet. And Habara's figure is very agile, facing such intensive attacks, he also relies on Sharingan to dodge and shoot down those shurikens, and keeps approaching Troy's position. It's just that Habara couldn't get close to him at all, and every time he got a little closer, he had to retreat quickly. TCH, I thought this Uchiha Habara was so powerful, but it seems that it is nothing more than that. Seeing Habara in such a mess, Troy secretly thought. However, considering this guy's age, and I have dealt with Uchiha ninjas myself, his performance is considered decisive and excellent. Faced with the fact that he was not familiar with the ability, he only knew that the opponent was good at magnetic shields, so he resolutely gave up weapons with magnetic attraction. Being able to do this step is really beyond the reach of ordinary ninjas. But without knowing the enemy's intelligence, this guy is already doomed. Chakra suddenly poured into the 2 shurikens, and in the blink of an eye, the 2 shurikens became as slender as blades. Then Troy swung fiercely, and slashed at Habara. That special chakra attraction can almost guarantee that his sword can focus on Habara accurately. It's a pity that you don't seem to have much information about me. If that's the case, I'll send you on your way. Magnetic escape double blades of birds and bees. The sharp blade slashed directly at Habara's body, and at this moment, Troy suddenly felt something was wrong. Because the Uchiha in front of him suddenly showed no fear of death, he rushed towards him in a daze, as if he didn't pay attention to the power of this technique at all. This situation immediately gave him a bad premonition, reading www.yuyuganshu.com, but at this moment, he couldn't worry so much at all, he directly slashed down heavily. Boom! The white smoke was unrestrained, Habara's figure had disappeared, and a torn piece of clothing fell to the ground. Troy's face changed slightly, this kid discovered the characteristics of his technique. Troy was not allowed to think too much, a figure suddenly flew down from the sky, the speed was so fast that Troy could not react at all. And the figure didn't hesitate at all, he punched Troy in the head. Boom! With a crisp sound, Troy felt that his teeth were about to be smashed, but he was an excellent cloud ninja, and there was no problem with his physical fitness at all. Although this punch caused him some trouble and even made him feel dizzy, it was not fatal at all. However, his face became extremely pale the next moment, and a pair of scarlet 3 jade sharing eyes suddenly appeared in front of his eyes, and they met his gaze in just an instant. The word chakra has been transmitted to his own eyes through the pair of sharing eyes, and then spread into his mind. At this moment, his mind went blank, only the pair of scarlet 3 jades remained. At the moment when Troy fell into the illusion, Habara quickly formed seals with both hands, and then a hot fireball was ejected by him. What? The fireball instantly ignited Troy, and the severe pain made him break free from the illusion, but it was too late. To Yu Yuan, since he has become an opponent, he will never show mercy. And you let me remember because of the reincarnation of the dirty soil, then I will let you not even have the chance to reincarnate in the dirty soil.